Greetings, friends. I've been getting a few comments from different people regarding my video from a while back where I describe Earth as a game board and as hell. And these people are saying that I justify suicide. So I'd like to address their comments in this video. Let's remember, how is Earth hell? Because of the low consciousness of most souls here, and because of our sense of isolation from the divine. And that's how it should be. And that is a very bitter pill to swallow. Do not worry. Even though many of us may feel like we don't belong here, like there's no point in being here, every person is on Earth for a reason. How can you find your way home if you haven't gone far away? Finding your way home is the whole purpose of suffering. Justifying suicide is like quitting studying and expecting to be smarter. Some people quit studying because studying can be depressing and they've had enough. But when they quit, they know that it's not going to make them smarter or dumber. We go through experiences on Earth, including suffering, so that we may grow. I think if you commit suicide, you'll eventually choose to return to Earth to finish your lessons. Because think of what your greater soul could have in mind for you. It's very difficult when we're on our individual personality here to think of not only other souls that are us, but a greater soul, which is also us and which is choosing these experiences for us. And of course, when I say eventually, I don't necessarily mean in terms of time. I mean in terms of your progression, in terms of change in your vibration, in your consciousness. Because beyond our physical world here, what use is it to really speak of time? Life on Earth is an opportunity for spiritual evolution. I was listening to the author Ian Lawton speak about rational spirituality, as he calls it, and he brought up a pretty good point, which forces me to revise a little bit of my thinking, which is that how can there be past or future lives when everything is one moment of now? How can there be karma when everything is happening right now? There really is no past, present, and future. There is just now. So there could still be some justification for karma, for past lives, but perhaps it's not really like we think so in simple terms. So I spoke about karma and past lives over a year ago, and so maybe that would be my new take on it. That perhaps it's slightly illusory, but perhaps it's much more complicated. I haven't given that enough thought right now, and that's kind of off the topic anyway. So one reason people might think I'm justifying suicide is because I'm pointing out that Earth is hell. There's suffering here. And then another reason might be that I'm saying that in truth, the act of committing suicide will neither damn nor destroy your soul. Don't confuse the action with what is in the heart. If someone fulfills a societal more not to kill themselves because it's cowardly or whatever, don't confuse that with the person necessarily having faithfulness or a clear conscience. The only thing that can destroy your soul is to be filled with hate. I don't mean the passing kind of hate that we all experience. I mean permanent hate. And it's too bad that hate is an abused word these days. Whereas a soul filled with love will live forever. Now, will a loving soul commit suicide? Probably not that often, but it could happen. And I'll discuss some examples. I'm going to discuss Robin Williams and Ian Curtis, very deeply feeling individuals who commit suicide, who I believe always had love in their hearts. They just had other stuff too, and they got overwhelmed. So I can see why you might think of that as justifying suicide, but as we'll discuss, I don't see it that way. Perhaps some people commit suicide out of hate, but I don't think most people do. However, while killing yourself will not destroy or damn you, neither will it do your soul any good. Usually someone who commits suicide does so because they're overwhelmed with sadness or depression. Earth might be hell, but that doesn't mean you have to be overwhelmed by it. I pass no judgment on those who commit suicide, but it's certainly not something I advocate. Some people say that suicide is cowardly. I heard some guy saying that about Robin Williams. I don't agree or disagree. I do have respect for tough people. Can you imagine the kinds of people that existed in the Middle Ages? They must have been incredibly thick-skinned, and their genetic makeup was probably significantly different. They made great warriors and trailblazers. A Viking's best dream was to die in battle, which perhaps you could look at that as suicidal, but they're just like letting it to fate. Like, maybe I'll be killed in battle. That would be wonderful. And of course, they might not be living as long anyways. And then there's the whole issue that, people who don't live very long anyways, and like many people today in developing countries, they don't have time to get into this sort of contemplation that brings you into depression. But I'm not saying that all suicide is necessarily from an intellectual contemplation. Yes, there's a middle class or upper class phenomenon more than you see working class suicides. Or I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's more intellectual people do it. But not in all cases. But take that with a grain of salt, because when it comes down to the act, it's because of a feeling of depression, and poor people can obviously they suffer just as much as anyone else. Remarkably, they can deal with it very well sometimes, but those people can get depressed and they suffer too. So I mean, take that with a grain of salt, but I'm just bringing up this example of the Middle Ages to show that there certainly are times when people are tougher. They don't probably understand the suicidal mindset. Some people just don't feel pain and anguish the way that others do. In addition, certain astrological types have a harder time dealing with suffering. I would wager that it has to be the hardest for Cancer. Cancer is a water sign who thrives in the tidal zone, where it's very rich and they're good with money for that reason, but also because of being in the tidal zone, it periodically gets sucked out into the middle of the ocean, which is a terrifying experience, and it probably would wish that it was dead when that's happening. I'm a Cancer. I've been depressed from time to time, ever since about the age of 15, when you start to realize that, Earth is hell. But basically, by the grace of God, maybe because I pray and meditate and I have true friends, I always recover. And nowadays, when I get depressing thoughts, I just recognize that I'm going through a cycle. Things will improve. Robin Williams was a Cancer. He'd been in some bad relationships. At the time of his death, he was married, but essentially he was alone, and he couldn't deal with the fact that his brain was degenerating. Another Cancer was Ian Curtis, lead singer of Joy Division, who killed himself at 23. He was stressed out from his relationships, and perhaps he was suffering from bad medication he'd been given for his epilepsy. And he was lonely. He gave people plenty of heads up that he wanted to die. You can also see it in his lyrics. It seems that none of his bandmates really understood until it was too late. If any of you haven't yet listened to Joy Division, I suggest you start with the song Atmosphere. I'll include a link in the description. It's one of the most beautiful and saddest songs of the last 50 years. With Joy Division, the bass often took the role of the melody. It goes something like this. This is not how it actually goes, but this is just my crude, unskilled, semi-rendition little thing. This is a bad guitar, but whatever. I'm mentioning Robin Williams and Ian Curtis not to say that they should have or should not have committed suicide. I'm just saying that they were overwhelmed. They probably understood more than the average man that life has a lot of suffering, but that in itself does not justify suicide, and I'm sure they would have agreed if they'd been in a more stable state of mind. Another comment said, "Earth is a game. If you can't beat it, kill yourself." Well, yes, Earth is a game. But why should that mean that you have to beat the game? That's a very narrow view of games. Games are primarily for having fun and for learning things. Once you've had enough fun and you've learned enough, you'll naturally move on to another game. The ones who are obsessed with beating the game are the unhappy bankers, the snake-like politicians, the seething corporate media. And they have a pessimistic understanding of humanity and the game board on Earth, whereas I have an optimistic one. And I think it's also slightly true that they sold their souls, not necessarily to the devil, but that they sold their souls away. They're not trying to return to God. They're playing a different game, a material game here on Earth. So, I'm not trying to make it more complicated for you, but I'm just saying that, yes, you can get stuck in that mentality of, I either lose or I win, or you can look at it like we can all win. By the way, though this is slightly off topic, capitalism is also about having fun and learning. You could say it's about more than that. Don't fall into the narrow mindset that capitalism must create haves and have-nots. In fact, wealth can grow infinitely for all people. Just look at the last 200 years of Western history. It's the same for happiness. The growth of happiness is not limited by anything. To those thinking of killing themselves, I really hope you don't. My advice would be primarily talk to someone. Talk to your closest friends. And exercise. Eat healthy. This will boost your mood. Try deep breathing for at least 5 to 10 minutes. And pay attention closely just to your breath. And then afterwards, contemplate what could be troubling you deep down. Why are you suffering? What is the message here? What is God trying to tell you? Consider that you could be in an emotional trough, about to start rising again. Try to stick it out, at least to see if you will feel better. And if you stay in that trough, then it's a certainty you must change something in your lifestyle. What you change is beyond me, but something needs to change. And not just what you do, but what thoughts come into your head. The more we think positive thoughts, the more neural pathways are forged, which reinforce those patterns and lead to more positive thoughts, more good feelings, and vice versa for negativity. So be mindful. And I believe it extends beyond mere neurology into the mysterious world of synchronicity. We really can create our own realities. But we do so by the grace of God. So pray to God to help you. Consciously ask for help. The answers are waiting in your subconscious. Remember that you are always part of God. Nothing you do can ever separate yourself from Him. But remember also that despite being hell, Earth is the right place to be. To learn, to grow, and to have fun. Hasta luego, amigos.